Feeling stuck or unfulfilled? Searching for more meaning in your work and life? Wondering what's next? You're not alone, and you're in the right place. This is Focus on Why, the podcast that turns reflection into action. I'm Amy Rowlandson, and each week I dive deep with guests who've chosen to live and work with purpose. Together we explore what drives them, shapes their decisions, and gives their life meaning. Through real stories and honest conversations, you'll discover how to gain clarity, make confident choices, and create a life that truly matters. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why. Before we start, have you read my book, Focus on Why, Create a Purposeful Way of Life? It's an uplifting guide to living with purpose, clarity, and meaning, and it's co-authored with my late grandfather. Available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook, all the links you need to purchase your copy today are in the show notes. Today on Focus on Why, I am joined by Mark McNeice. Mark, welcome.
Well, I'm so happy to be here. This has been a long time coming.
Yeah, it has. And just want to reach out and say, well, shout out, I should say, to Chandani Khan for introducing us.
Yes, absolutely. She's doing great work out there.
Absolutely. So, Mark McNeice, or Mark Matthew McNeice, if we're going to go full name as I've got on my screen here. How are you, and what is it you're focusing on right now?
I am very well. I am right at the moment. So I work at a substance use disorder residential and IOP intensive outpatient program. And we have begun screening everyone that comes into our program for a brain injury history, which is something that is rarely done. And at the moment, we've done about 350 screens in our population with a 97% potential positive rate of brain injury history. So we're really starting to bring awareness and recognition there. And that is a lot of what I'm focusing on today.
97%.
97% out of 350 screens.
That So the people who are coming to this particular clinic, outpatient center, they don't know that they've had a brain injury.
There are diagnosed and misdiagnosed and undiagnosed, but
Okay.
yeah, it's a very high risk population. It's 100% chronically unhoused, mental health, criminally justice cycling, that kind of population, domestic violence. So very high risk. That's a part of the reason why the numbers are so high.
And what constitutes a brain injury?
All right, so we have acquired brain injury and traumatic brain injury. So that includes concussions, overdoses, car accidents, coma, stroke, repetitive blows. A lot of people miss and don't understand repetitive blows. That comes from, in the populations we see, some physical abuse, interpersonal abuse, repetitive blows from sports that people don't realize. Your football, soccer, even heading the ball so many times over a course of a career. Yeah, it's a lot of the missed injuries, especially from childhood and past generations, that people didn't realize what brain injuries were. And now it's not that it hasn't been there all the time, but you're looking at a much different cognitive pace of the world today. So it's very challenging just to keep up with screens and paperwork. And all you have to do in today's cognitive world, there's less body movement and more cognition being used. The damage that's being done in childhood or just the missed amount of brain injuries is really starting to show up. And of course it happens a lot. It's a good measuring stick in the substance use disorder facilities because people are self-medicating when they don't know about brain injury. And unfortunately it seems to the person to work in the moment. Of course it's not, and it's doing more damage to the systems in the brain. But if you don't know what's going on and you need to keep up in the pace of the world, and you're out there having to do things on your own to stay alive and survival, people gravitate to the tools that seem to work in real time, whether they know that it's the wrong fuel and making them worse or not. It's what they need in the moment. So it's a tricky, and it's been eye-opening really in identifying these histories, because a lot of people ask, is the chicken or the egg that comes first? Is it addiction or is it? And with these populations we're seeing, it's vastly the majority where the brain injury histories came early and heavy and a lot and not recognized. So not that it's all that, but again, if you're treating people in these high risk populations, Doesn't matter when the brain injury came, you're dealing with the person with the brain injury now, so regardless, you got to understand clinically and to the person, y'all need to understand the full picture.
So, what is the impact that these brain injuries are having on the person right now?
It can be so much. One of the big deals is it, with brain injury is neural fatigue. And if you don't know about that, that's where, see, I'm a survivor. I'm a brain injury specialist. I'm a person in long term recovery. I'm a survivor of multiple brain injuries, pretty much the same population I work with, other than the fact that I've been on all sides. So I was a corrections officer. I went through a police academy. I had the high school sweetheart, three children. I had all the stuff, great support system growing up. But that I started I got run over when I was 12 years old. And right from then, symptoms started getting misdiagnosed, and I was playing the football sports and stuff 6 weeks after being run over, once bones healed. So I was part of the population being missed. And why I get back into all this is because what it does for the person is when I was 14, 15 years old, they were diagnosing me with heart problems that were really sensory overload and dizziness and these kinds of things. And then they started with mental health diagnoses and depression, anxiety, bipolar, all these different diagnoses for symptoms that I was experiencing from brain injury and a history of it. And even though they were documented brain injuries, the correlation still wasn't there back then. So you start to self medicate or you start to spiral or develop survival habits because you don't really know what's going on with you. Then you start to see these histories of the folks where they're years down the line, misdiagnosed or undiagnosed. Now they've survival habited themselves. They've self medicated themselves. So they've had spirals psychologically from not knowing what was really going on. They've had spirals in life because of symptoms. So what you're seeing is once they have awareness and recognition to those symptoms, that now they're just connecting dots because and learning terminology of things they've been experiencing for 20, 30 years, it has a paradigm shift in their thinking almost immediately. Maybe not, they're not everyone's going to get sober the next day or rehabilitated the next day, but you can't begin the right process and direction without knowing what's going on, without the awareness. And really, a lot of the diagnosis we see, and I'm not saying they're all bad, a lot is exasperated from brain injury, a lot starts mental health, there's genetics early, and then the brain injuries exasperate. But you see, once the people do hear, once you do have a diagnosis and happen with me, a lot of the guilt, the shame, the confusion, these things start to look differently, right? You start to see a tangible reason for a lot of the experiences you've been having in life. And it was really game changing for a lot of this population. They've never heard the language before. They've known what they've experienced for years, but without the framework and language, you hear words like I procrastinate, or I just can't do this, or I just can't do that, because they don't have the language to say, I can't initiate a task because I'm low on dopamine from brain, So you start to give them a little bit of knowledge of the physiology of what they've been through, and you see motivation change. You see excitement. You see spread of awareness, right? Now they're taking this new knowledge they're gaining about themselves and their history to their therapists that they got to see, their doctors that they have to see, their family members. So it's been remarkable to see the awareness piece, even though you're not getting everybody to all this medical treatment because it's high risk populations and there's insurance problems and there's documentation problems. You're still seeing to the person that change by giving them the human knowledge. It's humane to them to let them know what's going on with them, or even the opportunity to have that understanding. And that makes such a big difference because whether it's brain injury, which is a big deal. But the bottom line is brain health and changing the habits. So people wonder, well, are they going to have another excuse for what's going on in their lives, or they're going to get disability or these kinds of. No one in these populations is fighting for that. They've been living in hell, and you start to tell them what resonates with them and identify it. there's not them piece at all. They just want to get better. They want help. They want to understand what's going on with them. So it's really been eye opening and wonderful, all the way through.
So the screening, Mark, how does it show up the injury and the impact? What does it look like in the actual screening?
So I'm from Massachusetts, and just as I was starting to get into screening, I thought I was going to have to do this long form, and I'm getting to the answer. So a little bit roundabout way, but I thought there's a Ohio State University has a traumatic brain injury identification method. About 3, 4 years ago, I was going to start using that. It was all on paper and long form, and it would have been a lot of work. So as I got closer to implementing it into a hospital setting, this NASHA OBIS, it's a National Association of State Head Injury Administrators, and it's an online brain injury screening support system. So it's NASHA OBIS. They put out this tool that is now online that you can take, that is, and I can tell you about the full parts of it because it's magnificent. And states within the United States is getting, different states pick up the package where you get to use the screening tool for free. You could have it in your wherever. It's global at the moment, and you can pay for it, or you get it for free through certain services. So they released it, and what it is it's an online screening tool by NASHA. The first half of it documents your lifetime history of brain injury. Now this is self-reported, right? And you'll have people again kind of, well, they said they got that themselves. It's the gold standard for brain injury because so many people didn't go to the hospital with brain injuries. They didn't know what brain injuries were. You weren't having physical abuse parents bringing you to the hospital to be checked. So there's no documentation. So gold standard is self-report. Again, also people used to say, well, I know I got a concussion, but why go to the hospital? They're not going to do anything but tell me to wake up every 5 hours, right? So they wouldn't go because that. So gold standard puts it into documentation form, your history of brain injury. Vague, they ask you specific questions, yes and no answers, but now you're documented. Then it kicks you to a symptoms questionnaire. Colorado symptoms questionnaire looks at cognitive, behavioral, and emotional challenges due to possible brain injury that you might be having. It's a fantastic questionnaire put out by Colorado. So now you do the questionnaire, plus you have the history. Now you're looking at clinically for, the work we do. Now we look at a full picture. Now we're looking at symptoms that might not be lack of motivation, might not be, a whole host of other behavioral health stuff, and it could be tied to brain injury. Now you're looking at things differently, sensory overload, fatigue. So clinically, that's wonderful for a program to have. To the person, now they have it for themselves, right? As well as the tool finds resources in your area that help you. Brain Injury Association in our area. So they'll send out flyers within this screening packet. It'll tell you what the screen found. It'll give you tips and strategies to the person as to what the screen found for what you're dealing with your symptoms. It'll give you a professional packet to give to anyone you're working with so that they can work with you as well. And it all goes, as soon as you hit submit, it goes right into the person's email. And if there's a facilitator giving the screen, they get the email as well. So it's just a standalone, fantastic piece of, it's not diagnostic, right? So it's screening, but like what we do in our program is we'll take the whole packet, we'll put it into a physical packet. We'll also put in a doctor's companion note to explain the whole thing to the doctors. And then we'll add stuff like MOCA, R bands, little mini neuropsych exams to strengthen the referral packets, or, you know, neurobehavioral inventories, memory testing, biofeedback, a whole host of other things to strengthen packets to get our clients to imaging, CT, MRI, but even more so neuropsych evals, because we know CT and MRIs, the imaging, don't show all the damages that we particularly have in our population. So it's just a wonderful, wonderful screening that people should really look into. It's put out by National Association of State Head Injury Administrators. So that's what we use, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. And I wonder if there's an equivalent in the UK or in other countries
But
for what you're offering here.
yeah, and I think I think it's global. I'll have to check with them again, but I believe this is a service that I think, yeah, I'll have to check, but I believe that anybody can register for it. So
Okay.
I'm not
And in
positive.
terms of then when it goes to the imaging, the CT, the MRI, those that have already been flagged as having potentially more serious issues, what does it then show up as on the
uh,
imaging and the CT and the MRIs?
well, that's the trick. So what we know is that the majority of our see, we get everyone. We get gunshot wounds that we get we get comas that within months the neurological event is almost forgotten about, and once the person heals, then it goes right to mental health. So that's just kind of like retelling the story so that you keep on bringing up. But as far as the CT MRIs, you're not going to see, that's why we put in the packet. You're not often going to see structural damage with the repetitive blows and the overdoses and a lot of the injuries that we see, the full histories. What you will see is you'll see the cognitive, emotional behavior problems through or neuropsych evaluations, and that's where we're really trying to get them. What ends up happening is we'll get them to the CT MRI, but with the understanding that our real goal is the neuropsych eval, which will show all the cognitive and emotional behavioral challenges. Plus, then that'll lead to the treatment of speech therapy, occupational therapy, those types of things. So, and it is extremely important to understand that them CT and MRIs do not show major. I mean, we back in when we were talking CTE first, for which is chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which repetitive blows from football players. One of the first diagnoses, the guy had gotten CT and MRI scans like 2 weeks before he had ended up committing suicide from it, and they didn't. The imaging showed nothing where his brain was actually absolutely ravaged by CTE. So the microscopic, and that's such an important point because so many people go after car accidents and these types of things, and there's not damage shown on them scans. So you assume I'm fine. And then them symptoms come down the line, months, days, weeks, whatever later, and you never tie it back. And that is the sense of the lights, the noise, the headaches, and then all of a sudden you're guessing, well, why am I experiencing all these things? But if you just had the imaging, you're not seeing the full damage. And those are a lot of the ones that we see people self-medicate for now as well.
And overlay the increased cognitive pace that we are having to live at, that you mentioned earlier. It is incredible the amount of information, data, and expected speed of response that we are now having to live up to.
It's such a huge factor, and that's where the neuro fatigue comes into play, where a lot of misdiagnoses come from not knowing these histories of brain injury. And then, I mean, imagine someone with a whole history, childhood of brain injury, repetitive blows, car accidents, then overdoses later, and then they're sitting in a crowded room having to sit and listen to multiple people talking, digest information, all these different things that they have to do within programming, not realize they're going to be exhausted after that. Maybe a headache. Now they're going to be irritated. They're going to be craving substances more because just that sitting in that room to a normal person is nothing. To a person with the brain injury histories that these people have, that's a game changer for the day, night, weeks. Now you're interrupting sleep. So if they don't know anything about the neuro fatigue and the way the brain works after brain injury, the filtering doesn't work the same anymore. So all light sounds hit the brain the same way, fatiguing it faster. More parts of your brain have to work in order to do the things that it used to do, just simpler, right? But you don't realize any of this. So just having a conversation one on one and processing that information can fatigue people in 15 minutes of a regular, and just to not understand that and then have to go to work, and now you can't function at work, and then they start to learn substances, give them a boost or whatever they need to regulate themselves, and without knowing what's really taking place, they're doing what they need to do to live in the moment. So once they know it, it changes things. Does it change things overnight? No, but now you got to untangle the psychological parts of it, and I got to untangle the substance use parts of it, the habitualization, so, but it begins the process and it's humane.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's the mission, the vision that you have for this, Mark?
I, my personal vision is really awareness is everything. And I really believe if, in the States here, if screening for brain injury was mandated in high risk populations like government funded substance use, mental health, criminal justice, the jails, and those, if it was mandated in these areas, they'd see the vast numbers that have spiraled into those pools. And there's a reason for that. Not only will it bring awareness and help recidivism and cycling of systems, it will bring awareness and stop the bleeding coming down. Do you understand what? So now you're learning from the inside out. Jails, your criminal justice people, police officers, corrections officers, everyone has to learn about brain injury because the whole population has it, right? If you start screening there, and you're going to see big numbers. So that is the main goal, is to really start screening for brain injury, beginning with high risk populations, start seeing it, bring the awareness, bring the education, and then start screening up the filter at youth, athletic places, primary care physicians, catch them on their way down, bring the awareness. And now once you have that kind of awareness, you can almost not eliminate brain injury. Obviously, that's never going to happen, but you can eliminate the ignorance of what's happening after brain injury. So really, that is the goal. That is feels to me attainable, like, because once the awareness is out there, we just can't keep hitting our heads. I mean, these are the most important and fragile things that there is, and people don't have that understanding. And the less we are moving our bodies and the more we're using screens and telephones, we really have to understand our brains because they're kind of being hijacked just with modern society as it is. So injury and maladaptive things is always the entry point to understanding, right? You look at Phineas Gage, it's kind of the reason why we know so much about the brain through injury. So, same type of thing. It's kind of a time where we got to start getting a hold of our brain function on our own, or we're going to be giving that up very quickly here. So, just the brain, bottom line is brain awareness, but immediacy is brain injury and screening for me right now.
So you mentioned you were a brain injury survivor, and often something that happens to us is where we tend to lean into our purpose. And now you've become this specialist in this area. Tell us about that journey, Mark.
Oh, okay. It was a long one. So it's pretty much been a lifetime. When I was 12, I was run over for the first time. I got hit by a motorcycle. The motorcycle put my nose underneath my ear. I spun in the air 15 feet, hit my head on the pavement, all that. So, anyways, broke arm, leg. Wasn't really noticed back then. So, right, this was 1986. I had the brain injury, all that, but they didn't really treat that or talk about it. So, 6 weeks later, Cass and came off. I grew up in a football family. My father was a football coach, brother, big football player. So 6 weeks later, I'm playing football. Concussions just start coming and coming. Anyways, eventually I end up with 15 brain injuries through I've been run over multiple times at this point by trucks, a couple other things. So there's a lot of brain injury. But again, early, I started immediately getting diagnosed through mental health disorders. Even while I was getting concussions and brain injuries, they weren't matching the symptoms, problems in basketball gyms, all these things, and high blood pressure. So they started putting me on heart monitors. Then they started the mental health diagnoses, 15 different medications, all these things. Right. And I never know what's going on. So it changed me as a person too. So now I stopped playing basketball going into college and that kind of thing because I couldn't handle gyms. But then you start lying and making things up because I didn't know. They telling me I'm just an anxious person, which I didn't know. I knew that wasn't the case. So, you start telling people excuses and that kind of starts changing who you are. But, I held it together. I got married to my high school sweetheart. There was a lot of support, great family, all that, raised really well. So that's a lot of difference with the population I'm with now today, too. And this is a lot of reason why I'm doing this now is I'm obligated. Like I had an opportunity a lot of people don't have, just with the upbringing alone. So eventually, I held the facade for a long time, changed a lot of jobs, corrections officer, worked with juveniles, high risk juveniles, police academy. Like I did all the things, but I'd always have to leave or, these types of things and make excuses. Eventually, though, early too, I'd gone to the hospital so many times with panic attacks from I'd get in a car, have dizzy headache, and you think you're having a heart attack. That's what they diagnosed me. So a lot of panic attacks. Eventually, I had one doctor tell me, he said, you're over 21 years old, right? And I said, yeah. And he goes, instead of keeping to come here with panic attacks, why don't you just sit down and have a couple of beers? And that was awful because it worked. So, so what as that became a little bit of a self medication. And again, like I said, I didn't know what was going on all the time. So eventually I spiral out. By the time I'm 37, I have 15 brain injuries. I've been run over a whole bunch of times. My ex-wife, nothing was bad. It was just hard living with a brain injured person, driving me under lights every night to count street lights. I can't sleep ever. It's just a disaster. So I spiraled. I end up going to 80 detoxes myself. Alcohol becomes my self medication. I lose everything. I have a crush accident, which I became paralyzed. At one point, I had to learn to walk. I was in a nursing home for a long time. Divorce came down the road. Both parents died at the same time of neurological diseases. My mother with ALS was diagnosed and died within 6 months. My father, dementia from brain injury, which is another story, at the age of 64. They both died 63, 64. He died, divorce happened. I got paralyzed for life. Big spiral hit. Now I have to try and care for brain injury with no resources. So now I'm that homeless person. I went to 80 detoxes, bunch of rehabs. I had psych admits. Didn't know I was going to suicide attempt. I was homeless in multiple areas. So, again, I knew about brain injury at one point, but then you got to care for your brain and survive at the same time, and survival takes over. And wasn't all use or anything like that, but it is you have no resources. You're eating unhealthy just to get calories. You are so survival. I started to understand as well. And again, a lot of it was through misdiagnosis and misunderstanding. Eventually, I had my last what's called a section where they put you away because they're concerned about you. I got put away, and a counselor. I had finally wrote down my whole history of brain injury, all the symptoms I had been through. I had done this a million times. No doctors looked at it or anything. And finally, this one woman, I think 39 years old, looks at it and goes, "Oh my goodness, she's just gotten back from a brain injury substance use seminar. She looked at the history, looked at the symptoms, just was amazed at all of it. And then she got me my first neurology appointment at that age, which was unbelievable. My very first time, I had a traumatic brain injury specialist neurologist, which is important as well. I saw her the very first time. And from that second, she told me my entire life, everything I had experienced, like everything I cried immediately. I just could not believe what I was hearing. From that point on, it changed everything. I don't, but I had that kind of background to, I mean, of course, I still failed and had to learn a lot and everything new. Survival habits had to be broken, psychological spirals, a lot of trauma at that point. So I had a lot of untying to do, which was a huge process and not pretty, but failure and success and failure and success. And I'm not just talking use at all. I'm talking failures of brain injury strategies, and you got to learn to pace and rest now, and all these things that were foreign to me that were still going, I was going to fail at just because they weren't habits or really known at the time. So, but it gave me the chance once I knew about the brain injury. So eventually, through a lot of hard work, a lot of rough spots, and then the right people around, I built a support system, and then got hired by the place that I'd gone to detox so much for. I became a brain injury specialist. I started doing survivor speaking everywhere, and this is while still struggling and everything. It wasn't has not been clean. So, I mean, clean as far as a easy path. It's been a very difficult path, but in the meantime, sharing the stories, being given training, starting to do the work. And then I had a lot of previous training too. But now I'm bringing in all this insight into lived experience where I was seeing brain injury like everywhere. And, as I'm homeless, I'm talking to people because I understand, right? So now I'm in all these rehabs and all these tough jail. They put me in the jail cell that I used to run the pod in. So that was a whole experience too for DUI, driving under the influence, awful years ago. But so I'm seeing all the brain injury on both sides. The officers have brain injuries. I was one of them guys, and now the population that we're working with, all these populations have so much brain injury and they're just doing so much survival habits and self-medication, and there's just no understanding of what they're going through, that now that with the insight in the line of sight that I have now, it's kind of hard too, because to understand what these people are going through and know that they're not going to get the help that they need a lot of times too. So brings it right back to the opportunity I had in screening this one population that's called alternative living centers, which is I could have went to the rehab that everyone pays $20,000 a day for in the middle of the woods and all these things. I could have went there and worked, but it wasn't the same. Like that wouldn't be this population that I got offered or found 100% chronically unhoused, 81% they use the mental health resources within our community, 51% come from probation and criminal justice, previous domestic violence, veterans. So it's all the high risk people. And I just felt like that's where this had to be done. And they're not, we're getting them insurance, so they don't get the care they really should, and just identifying it in the education piece, because a lot of people of these folks aren't going to get the care, but just the awareness, the education, and then you start helping them develop strategies and new routines. The awareness of it, even if that's all they have, is very important. And I think we missed that because a lot of people are worried about starting screening. Do we have to have this doctors in place and all this in place? And you need to just start screening so that these people are given a chance. It's humane to them. The systems aren't that hard. We started at this ALC, Alternative Living Centers. I was the only screener. We had one other counselor who was doing brain health days where he was doing psychoeducation on brain health and some of the biofeedback. And then we immediately brought in the screening tools, started brain injury support groups, advanced the curriculum around brain injury, brain health, trauma, all neurobiology, just one day, keeping the substance use program all around it. And that turned into so many referrals, and now more counselors doing screening, the whole staff trained residentially, clinically. We're training guys within the program to become screeners through a whole curriculum. So things that, and the best piece of it is probation now calls us and talks about brain injury. Court systems call us and talk about brain injury. Outside therapists call us and talk about brain. So the jails have asked us to, I've screened at the reentry program, which is unheard of for a lot of jails to accept this. And now they want to start doing it for the entire population going in. So it's really been from the inside out. And it didn't take, we're still under resourced as a program, and we are still under resourced in the area I live. I live a rural, pretty rural area. So there's not a lot of support out there. Yet this is having huge impacts just through awareness and education. And it can really stop spirals. It can stop the bleeding. We know pharmacology, right? If you don't know the full picture, there's medications. If you don't know someone has a brain injury, those medications are worse for brain injury and can exacerbate problems. So if there's not that full picture, then it's really well, it's you don't get the full picture, and clinically it can be very bad, right? So, and that's what we see, a lot of not over medication, just not full pictures out there. So once you do have the full picture and you see the medications and all the diagnoses, you kind of step back a little. And the beauty of it is the medical world in our area is now taking notice and changing things and taking that into consideration, which is huge.
It is huge. And I just wondered if you ever had the chance to go back to the counsellor and just explain the ripple effect of what you're now doing as a result of that one session.
That was such a, I was taken so far out of it. I never got back to that one counselor. However, the one that treated me at the detox where he was the one who kept me alive for brain stuff too. He is now my colleague at the place we're at. So, and he's 75 years old. He was a 35-year counselor. So I got one of the two. I wish I could have, but at the point that it was such a, I wasn't familiar with that program really. So I would have
Yeah.
loved to have. Yeah.
So what is the time frame? Help me understand that to that time then to now to getting that
When I,
experience.
when I first, the
When the
doctor,
Yeah, when she came back from that brain injury substance use
oh,
seminar and recognized your
so
symptoms.
this was, that's a great question. And this is why the story is actually really, so that happened in 2010. So in 2010, this is why I I had experienced a lot of hardship at that point. However, in 2010, that's when she brought me knowledge that from that point I immediately got sober. So from 2010 to 2013, sober, but now I'm living brain injury life, trying to relearn all that. And what I was doing was I was doing stonework, and this is important just because, well, it shows why I took a note. I could have gotten it right there and it would have been a different story. However, 2010, 2013, sober, I'm working on brain injury stuff, learning how to live that way, getting education, all that. Last day of stone seat, I'm doing stonework at this point. I told the, now here's the other problem with brain injury. You tell bosses and people outside of knowing about your brain injury, about brain injury, they don't understand. So I let my boss know I had brain injury. There'd be times I couldn't do work, I'd fatigue out. It was all understood. So, long story short, last day of the season, I got pushed into another stone job. You lose focus. I was ended up being kind of a disaster, trouble talking, driving home. Everything was a hard time. Last day of the season, I made a mistake with a piece of equipment. I was by myself and I got split in half. So I broke my pelvis, both hips, my back, my bladder exploded. I had to be airlifted. I was by myself. So I was supposedly paralyzed for life. Um, Now that's when I got airlifted. Now I'm in a nursing home. From the nursing home, the pipes in my house exploded. So my house got destroyed and the insurance lapsed. That's when both my parents died at the same time. Divorce happened and I couldn't work anymore and I was paralyzed. So now all that happened within like 8 months to a year. I came out of that. Now I'm homeless, jobless, can't work, no more support system. Everything's gone. Doctors, one retired, one went to Pennsylvania, so no more medical care. Everything's gone. And now I'm sober, but eventually the homelessness and the paralysis I end up picking up. That's where the next portion of it took about 6 years in that homelessness, cycling through institutions. That's when I got a DUI. All these things happened in that period. Then I finally got traction out of the survival stuff. That's um, when it's about 2018, when 2018 rolled around, that's when I ended up finally getting traction. Got to stay with my brother in another state. And that's when the final pieces came together and started the process to get into where I'm at today. But it's been, quite a road, which the beauty of it was too is I hadn't lived through most of those high risk populations that I had the second time through. So if I didn't have the accident, there wouldn't have been the homelessness. There wouldn't have been all the suicide attempt. I mean, not that in connecting the dots backwards, the understanding I have of the population I work with now, that's why I do it now. I have to, and I want to, but I have to. Like I see a different line of sight. There's ways to help them. And just like I said, the information, the education changes things to the person, makes paradigm shifts within them that leads to, it's like I said, it's not bringing immediate sobriety. Immediately, all they're not homeless, they're not right, but it begins that process of healing and moving in the right direction. And the success stories have all really come from self-education and then them finding the resources, getting the small opportunities that lead them their way out of this. Where really, if they don't know about their brain injuries, it's a very tough task to be guessing against the wrong things. So that's where I often don't, I'm not able to tell that mid-range part of the story because my story is actually so long. If you get the whole thing, that that's such an important piece because that's when I really delved into the high risk populations and trying with a great background that I have, right? I've seen magnificent people in my history, like great moral characters, strong characters. I've seen that. So now I have this part of my life, but the population I work with, they don't have that foundation to start with. And then to think that they can pull themselves out. I've barely made it out of this. And who knows, maybe I haven't all the way together now. But to think that all that I had to work with and barely being able to pull my way through systems and brain injury and all that I did, and then to see these histories of these folks that I work with, and then them have just be dismissed or not given the opportunity to even know what's going on with them. And then to be oftentimes, like we teach neurobiology, which goes over unbelievably. We teach neurotransmitter function. We teach them what their medications are doing. All these people think are college level, but we do it with videos and very practical ways. And what I don't think a lot of folks realize is they've manipulated their brains so much. They've seen how their brains malfunction throughout their lives. They've seen how they self-medicated and made them work differently. They've seen them fail for reasons they've self-questioned forever. So once you put terms to them and start really giving them that kind of science, and they don't have to be able to repeat and memorize and pass things on tests, they just need an idea. And I don't think a lot of credit is given to this population to understand. And we're in 2026. I mean, the science and information is there. Once they have it, it changes things. That has been the biggest surprise and biggest gratification that in a 2 hour group, you see people are angry, like, how come I didn't know this kind of stuff? Why? And just changes them right there. And then the excitement, motivation. But again, like I said, that doesn't mean instant success. It just means a different thought process and some different motivation. But yeah, that's why I kind of have to do this now. I can't imagine not sharing the information at this point.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing from that shift in in sharing your second part of the story, or the more in-depth version, is awareness is not enough. You were aware that you couldn't work to a certain period, but advocating for yourself, that was the key point, to because that was what led to the accident. So awareness is only one part of this, but taking responsibility and seeing it through to really saying no, enough is enough, is the key part there.
Right, right. Yeah. Oh, it's so multi-layered and the action steps and having to, yeah, it's frustrating, all of it, certainly.
Yeah.
Awareness isn't enough.
No. Well, Mark, awareness is all we have to share about this today, and it hopefully that will be the catalyst for some action taking. How could people reach out and connect with you? I know we'll put all these links into the show notes, but what's the best way for them to do that?
I am on LinkedIn under my name, Mark McNeice. I have a website coming out. It's in its final phases, but also you can get me at Mark, MARC, at alccorp.org.
Yeah, all of those links will be in the show notes so that people can reach out and connect. Mark, thank you for sharing your focus on why. And my goodness, what a story, what an experience, and what a roller coaster your life has certainly been so far. And I feel like there's a lot more to come. Not in the so many lows that there have been, but definitely in helping to achieve some more strides forward in this awareness piece, but also to help others to take their very necessary action that will align their life on a more even path as well for them. So thank you. How would you like to close out today's episode?
Well, first I want to say thank you so much to you. I mean, these are such important platforms to do this on, and I really appreciate you reaching out to me. It's been a pleasure. My final message would be awareness and education. Then have sympathy and empathy for people if you don't understand what's going on. A lot of times we don't understand what's going on, and I find that the more we understand our brains and the more we understand each other, the more empathy we have for one another. There's always something going on in someone's life. So be kind.
That's a wrap for today, but the journey doesn't end here. Share your takeaways, leave a review, or post your insights. Your voice helps others discover the value of these stories. Want to dive deeper into purpose? Check the show notes for ways to work with me. Get a copy of my book or to sign up for Friday Focus, my weekly newsletter packed with clarity and inspiration. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why.